Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So, I have just turned 30 years old. And to celebrate, I'm going to be sharing and reacting to 7 different life lessons from my last 7 years of being on YouTube. And this has been an absolutely wild journey where I've been documenting the process for the last 7 years of building my business and growing my channel and writing my book and ultimately being able to quit my job and do what I want. And I've learned so many lessons along the way. So let's rewind back to 2017 to my 23-year-old self and let's get started. Why am I vlogging? It's not really something I've ever done before. I've made a few videos over the last few weeks while in Cambodia giving tips for the BMAT, the biomedical admissions test, which is a test that people have to do to get into studying medicine at Oxford and Cambridge and some other universities. I've been teaching people how to do well in this test for the last few years, so I thought I'd make some videos about it. And that turned out to actually be quite fun. And around the same time I started getting into Casey Neistat and the other sort of big people in the YouTube vlogging community. And it seems like a really nice community. It seems like a really fun thing to do. I'm hoping that, like, very worst case scenario, even if no one ends up watching these videos, which is pretty likely, it'll probably just be friends and maybe my grandma occasionally. I'm pretty sure my brother will watch each one. He's cool like that. Even if no one else watches these videos, at the very least, it'll be a fun thing to do, firstly. It'll kind of stretch my creative muscles, give me a sort of creative outlet while going through medical school and while being a doctor. And it'll be really nice to, I mean, at least I hope it'll be really, really nice to look back on in a few years' time and be able to see the behind the scenes and kind of document the process of what it was like to be a medical student, what it was like to be a junior doctor. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do this, and it's pretty scary. You really do need to have a not giving a toss about what other people think type attitude, but I think it'll be quite fun. And if you're watching this, then it means it's probably on the internet somewhere, which is not what I was planning when I initially pressed the record button and pointed the camera at my face. But I suppose you've got to start somewhere, and the first 50 videos are going to be terrible anyway, so probably don't watch them. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. That's an interesting one. So I made this video in June of 2017 and I had maybe like 35 subscribers on YouTube at the time. And there's a couple of interesting lessons in there. One of them is the value of just doing the thing. I still remember that moment in 2017 where I thought, oh, I should get started with vlogging. And the first thought that came to my mind was, I don't have the right equipment. The second thought that came to my mind was, I need to practice. I've never done this before. The third thought was like, what's even the point? Like, who cares? But I'm so glad that the bias towards action of just like, you know what? Let's ignore all of those thoughts. Let's pick up my phone. Let's lie on the bed. Let's turn the phone to face me and let's just start talking and see what happens. I'm so glad that bias to action happened, because without that, I might have never started vlogging. I might have never done videos outside of the medical stuff. It's like that vlogging muscle was what ultimately I think built up to the point where I've now made over 800 videos on this channel over the last 7 or 8 years. And actually over the last 8 years, there have been some periods in my life where I haven't actually used the bias to action approach, where I've overthought the thing, where I've spent too much time thinking and planning and not enough time just doing the thing. I think in the early stages of a project, especially when you're starting something new for the first time, there's a lot of value in just getting started and doing the thing. The strategy can always come later. But over time, especially as the channel grew and the business grew, I kind of lost some of that like bias to action, and it sort of became quite, just too in my head, just too thinking about it. But actually, if I really think about it, all of the best products that we've ever made as a business have all basically come as a result of me having an idea or someone in the team having an idea and us executing on it within a few days. That was how we initially built the first cohort of our YouTuber Academy. That's how we made our latest productivity course. That's how a lot of my book, Feel Good Productivity, came together, was in those kind of bursts of intensity of just getting started and doing the thing. And then the strategy and stuff comes further down the line. So this is a lesson that I still wish that I took a little bit more seriously. That when getting started with something, just get started. The overthinking and the strategizing and stuff can always come a little bit later. And the other nice thing about this one is this attitude of, even if this thing fails, it still will have been worth it, because at the very least, it will flex my creative muscles, it'll help me learn how to edit videos, it'll be a nice memory. Maybe my grandma will watch the videos, that sort of thing. And I think from day one of the attitudes that I'm glad I had, which I've kind of struggled with at times, is not focusing on the outcome, but instead focusing on the process. So it's nice seeing this and Looking back to myself from 7 years ago and how much I was focusing on enjoying the process, and as a reminder to myself that if you can find a way to make the work itself feel energizing and enjoyable, then, the scoreboard will take care of itself.
Finally, her question is, what is life like post 5K? Which is, clearly that's a banter question, but I think it does raise a wider point that about this whole thing about having milestones. When people say that when I hit 100,000 subscribers, then something, or when I get that 3-bedroom house, then I'll be happy. When I get that raise, then I'll be happy. When I make $1 million, then I'll be... And, invariably, that's obviously never the case. It's more, as, in the immortal words of Miley Cyrus, it's about the climb. It's not about reaching the destination. There is an absolutely incredible article written by a programmer I follow called DHH. He runs a company called Basecamp, which is a software company. It's an article on Medium, linked here and down below, and it's entitled "The Day I Became a Millionaire." And he's talking about the story of how he felt when Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, decided to buy a tiny stake in his company for a few million. So he and his business partners suddenly became a few $1 million richer pretty much overnight. And he talks about the feelings he had when he saw this money in his bank account and the stuff he bought. And ultimately he says that actually he realized that, the things he wanted to do were continue programming, continue working on his company, continue spending time with his friends and family. You don't need $1 million for that. So yeah, clearly, what is life like post 5K? Life post 5K is absolutely no different to life post 1K or even, post 200 subscribers, because I'm enjoying the process of making these videos and connecting with you guys. It's nice. It's nice in a way having a bigger audience, because then, I get more comments, and if I, ask something, a poll on Instagram, follow me on Instagram, please. Or if I ask people to send questions in for a 5K subscribers Q&A, then there are obviously more questions coming in than there were when I was at 200 subscribers. But I mean, honestly, apart from that, it's no different. It's about the climb, as Miley Cyrus says. I'll link the Spotify to the song down below.
Oh, this is some good stuff. So this was filmed on the 21st of March 2018. I had just hit 5,000 subscribers. I was 24 years old, I believe. 23 years old still. I hadn't quite turned 24 yet. And this was when I was a final year medical student at Cambridge. This was my dorm room. It was a very nice dorm room, and I sort of converted it into a bit of a YouTube studio with my janky lights and stuff. What's life like post 5,000 subscribers? It's interesting looking back on this now, 6 years later, where we've just crossed 5.5 million subscribers. And I would still say exactly the same thing. 5.5 million subscribers doesn't feel radically different compared to 5,000 subscribers, because I'm still focusing on enjoying the process, the whole feel-good productivity angle. Things are different in the sense of, obviously, I now have a team, I have more money. I've now become a millionaire thanks to this YouTube channel and the business around it. And I've also found, like the DHH blog post, which I still read fairly regularly, that becoming a millionaire doesn't really change anything. Because what I enjoy doing is hanging out with friends and family, reading stuff, speaking to cool people, making videos every now and then, and doing a talk every now and then. Like, that's just a generally fun thing to do. Becoming a millionaire has allowed me to quit my job, my day job, being a doctor, such that I can basically spend all my time doing this sort of stuff, which I enjoy more. But to be honest, I also enjoy being a doctor. So I think really, a lot of this just really comes down to focusing on enjoying the process. Enjoyment is efficiency. When you're enjoying the process, the scoreboard takes care of itself. Now, one thing that I read on a regular basis happens to be a totally free email newsletter called Morning Brew, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Morning Brew is a completely free daily email newsletter designed for busy people and professionals, and it covers the day's most important business news and explains how it affects your work and day-to-day life. Back in the day, I used to waste a lot of time scrolling on different apps and news services, but now I just read Morning Brew most mornings, and that gives me basically everything I need to know in these worlds that I care about in just a few minutes, so business and finance and tech. It summarizes the world's must-know news every day, but unlike traditional news, it's actually entertaining, and it's written in a pretty engaging style that's fun and accessible, and actually really interesting for anyone to read. For example, Morning Brew is how I'm personally keeping up with all of the ridiculous stuff that is going on in the world of AI, and seeing if there's anything I can incorporate from that into my own life and my own business. I'm also using it to stay up to date with social media trends and movements, which generally helps me think about the long-term future of this business. And in fact, there are over 4 million professionals like you and me who read Morning Brew every single day, and it's totally free and takes less than 10 seconds to sign up, so you might as well. If you fancy signing up, then do head over to morningbrewdaily.com/Ali, or hit the link in the video description, and that will let you sign up completely for free, and you'll also be supporting the channel along the way. So thank you so much, Morning Brew, for sponsoring this video. The blog post that I want to talk about is called The Psychology of Passive Barriers. This is a blog post that was written on a blog called Get Rich Slowly. Bit of a crap name, but it's actually one of my favorite personal finance blogs. And it's actually a guest post. So it was written by someone else on the blog. And the person it was written by, that I only found out like right at the end after I read this, because I didn't realize, is a guy called Ramit Sethi, something like that. And Ramit Sethi is quite famous amongst the personal finance community because he wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich, which is also a really terrible, like clickbaity, spammy sounding title, but it's actually a really good book. Kind of like Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. It sounds like an absolutely terrible title, but the content in it is really good. And the whole blog post is basically about this idea of passive barriers, an idea that I like to refer to as friction. You know, it's not an original idea by any means. Lots of people have come up with it. Basically, the idea that often it's not anything particularly big or insurmountable that stops us from achieving our goals or from, getting good habits or doing the things that we want to do. Often it's just the passive barriers that are in place. So it argues for, when it comes to the realm of personal finance, it's about reducing these barriers. Like he talks about a story of some guy that he knew who had a check for like $3,000 and just never got around to cashing it. And a few months later, the company who sent in the check went bankrupt. So he essentially lost $3,000. And then you asked him, okay, like, why didn't you cash the check? He was like, oh, right, I just didn't have an envelope on me. And it's just like such a pointless passive barrier that caused him to lose £3,000. Equally, there's loads of other stories in this blog post, and I found myself reflecting on my own life about all the various passive barriers that happen to be there in my own life that stop me from doing the things that I want to do. And I kind of discovered this when I started making these YouTube videos, and the process of setting up all this equipment, we've got a microphone there, a massive light there, a camera, a screen, like the process of setting this up, at the start, it took so long that this was like a big passive barrier to me actually, sitting down and filming a video. Whereas I realized that if I can streamline this process, if I can reduce the friction, then it makes it a lot easier and more pleasant for me to sit down and churn out a video, and that just has good things in general. Also, there's things for example, in Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about how if we want to build good habits, we should make those habits obvious. So for example, if you want to floss, that teeth thing, then you would stick your floss in front of the counter in your bathroom rather than inside the cabinet. If you want to stop playing PlayStation so often, all you have to do is just put the PlayStation away in its cupboard, such that it becomes a barrier, a passive barrier. It becomes some sort of friction that you have to overcome in order to then take it out again. So this blog post, The Psychology of Passive Barriers, kind of breaks this down in a lot better detail than I'm currently doing, and it just explores it really nicely. And it was probably the main blog post that really resonated with me in the month of June when I read it.
All right, so this was filmed on the 2nd of July 2019. I had recently turned 25 years old, and the YouTube channel I think was around 200,000 subscribers at this point, and I was still working full-time in my job in the National Health Service at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge. I was working as a junior doctor. One of the things I often think about is this idea that friction is the most powerful force in the universe. Removing friction from things that we want to do, or adding friction to things that we don't want to do, is a profoundly useful way of nudging our behavior towards where we want it to be rather than where we don't want it to be. Most recently, I realized that one of the things that was stopping me from sleeping on time is that I would browse YouTube videos at night while on the toilet. So I decided, let's figure out a way to add friction to the process. I downloaded an app called Opal. It's really good, and it just blocks YouTube, Instagram, Reddit, and Twitter after 9 p.m. and before 9 a.m. So it means that it's not impossible for me to access YouTube. I could go on Safari and go on youtube.com. I could sit down on my computer and go on YouTube. But the fact that I can't access YouTube on my phone, the fact that I've just added that little barrier that stops me from accessing YouTube has just changed the quality of my sleep, because now I'm just not screwing around on social media at nighttime. And then also, first thing in the morning, I found that I was just sitting on the toilet and browsing Instagram. So I just turned the thing on. So it's like, I can't access social media between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. This is one thing that I'm always on the lookout for. Like, if I ever want to make a change to my behavior, instead of thinking, oh, I just need to make that change, which is basically never going to happen, instead I think, okay, what is the system that I can add in place that will make it easier for me to make that change? And that means we can nudge our habits slowly towards things that are good for us and away from things that are bad for us. Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, you might like to check out my completely free 20 lessons I learned in my 20 email course. This is 5 days worth of emails. You can click the link in the video description, you enter your email address, and then I'll send you an email every day for 5 days. And each email will have 4 different life lessons that have been taken from my experiences in my life over the last 10 years. So if you're interested in that, check it out. 5 days of emails, you can unsubscribe anytime. It's completely free, never gonna sell your data, all of that stuff, but that's linked down below.
We've got a few questions as well, and kind of what you've learned since starting the channel and your side businesses. And I'm going to sort of try and relate that to medicine in a way. But this is stuff that I've talked about at length before. You know, this idea that I think, like, for me personally, I don't want to live a life where my full-time job, the thing that I do for a living, is kind of making a living. Like, I don't want my job to be the thing that I need to actively do to make money. I want to have the option to do what I want. And obviously money is a part of that, because we all need some amount of money to live. And for most of us, that amount of money is directly coupled to the thing that we spend our time doing. And I've long thought that I don't want that to be the case for me. I want to have a job like I want to stay in medicine because medicine's fun, but I don't want to have to stay in medicine because I need to pay the bills. And so over the last couple of years, as the YouTube channel's really taken off, thank you everyone who watches these videos, especially if you're watching this far. As the YouTube channel's taken off, as I started making more courses and classes on Skillshare and affiliate products and these different streams of income, I feel I've gotten to a point where I really don't need to rely on medicine to make money. And that feels like a really good position, because it means that now when I'm doing medicine, I'm doing it for fun rather than because I have to. And again, you know, this isn't like a dichotomy thing. It's obviously like a spectrum. There are some people who absolutely love it and do it for fun, and it also happens to make money, which is absolutely fantastic. But for me, like, I think if given the choice, the way that I've spent the last 2 years is not how I would choose to spend the rest of my life. Like, I would not.
Ooh, that's good. The way I've spent the last 2 years is not how I would choose to spend the rest of my life.
Would not actively choose that on average 5 days a week and for 48 hours a week, I'm gonna drive an hour to work, drive an hour back, and spend time in a hospital. I don't think that's the way, like, if I could design my lifestyle and my life from scratch, that's not what I would actively choose to do with it. I think what I would choose is that 2 or 3 days a week, I'd wanna do medicine because it's fun, but I wouldn't wanna do it much more than that. At least that's what I'm currently thinking. You know, obviously this is subject to change. We all change our mind at various different times. I've changed my mind on what sort of specialty I want to do 100 different times. It's fine. We don't need to have all the answers.
Oh, okay, this is good. This is really good. It's kind of weird, like watching these back and being like actually being able to see the real-time documentation of my thought process as it evolved over time. Because I remember doing around that time really thinking about this question that, like, if I could design my life completely from scratch, what would I choose to do? And even though I enjoyed being a doctor, I realized it's not what I would choose to do if I could completely design my life from scratch. This video was filmed on the 6th of August 2020. I would have been 26 years old. It was my final day working as a doctor. At the time, I was planning to just take 1 year out of medicine to potentially do a gap year where I'd spent some time in Australia doing emergency medicine as a specialty and blah, blah, blah. And then COVID happened, which closed Australia's borders, which sort of ended up me accidentally becoming a full-time YouTuber, even though that was never quite the intention when I decided to take a break from it. But I think this question is really good. Is how you've spent your time in the last, let's say, 6 months, how you would like to spend your time for the rest of your life? If the answer is no, then something should probably change, maybe. At least that's how I think about it. As I think about it now, if I think about what I do these days, where I film for a day a week, I have my team mostly, well, some of my team are in person, I build stuff, I'm trying to build businesses on the side, write a book every now and then. Is that how I would choose to spend the rest of my life? Honestly, at this point, the answer is yes. Obviously, I want to get married and have kids and stuff, and that's going to change things, and maybe leave the UK, and maybe live somewhere else, blah, blah, blah. But broadly, if I think of what I do for work, you know, outside of the sort of family circumstances, I think about what I do for work. This actually is how I would want to be spending my time, at least for now. Obviously, subject to change. As things change over time, you know, I may decide that at some point, filming videos every week is no longer how I want to spend my time. Or, I don't know, building businesses and trying to grow them is no longer how I'd like to spend my time. But at least for now, it definitely feels very alive within me. It feels very aligned to the future that I want for myself. And now when I ask myself the question of, you know, if I could design a life completely from scratch, well, what would it look like? It lands on almost exactly what I'm doing right now. And that was not the case 4 years ago. So this is like cool to see that trajectory. And so if you've got this far in the video, firstly, thank you for watching. But I would pose this question to you. If you were to design your life completely from scratch, how different would that look compared to what you're currently living? And then, what can you do to bridge the gap? For me, I've realized that the life I want is one where I don't have to go to an office every day. I can choose to go to an office with my own team if I want to, but I don't have to. The life that I want is one where I can essentially kind of spend my time reading, writing, learning, teaching, building stuff, and working with a team somewhat in person to make that stuff a reality, at least on the work side. And that's slowly the life that I've kind of built over these last 8 years of doing the stuff on YouTube, which we've literally documented the journey of throughout the whole time.
I had a session with my writing coach. His name is Azul. He's very nice. He was introduced to me by Pat Flynn, who you might know from the Smart Passive Income podcast. So Azul and I have been working together for the last few months, and he's been helping me come out of my own fear of like self-promotion when it comes to writing and all of these other various kind of baggages associated with like writing a book, which apparently loads of different authors go through. And there was something that Azul said during this call, which really like changed the way that I was approaching this. And he just kind of reminded me, he was like, look, Ali, you're supposed to be having fun writing this book. It doesn't sound like you're having very much fun right now. And I was like, damn, you're right. Like just that reminder. Because like my whole mantra throughout life is that, you know, this thing of journey before destination, this thing that, yes, goals are like whatever. But what's more important than setting and achieving ambitious goals? What's more important than that is enjoying the journey and enjoying the process of doing them. Weirdly, if you enjoy the things that you're doing, then chances are you'll become more successful at them, if success is what you're optimizing for. And after Azul reminded me of this thing that I'm supposed to be having fun in writing the book, I also realized that I'd been taking it too seriously. Like I'd been fixated on the outcome of, oh my God, A, I want this book to be really good. And B, and this feels shameful to admit, but I was really fixated on the outcome that I really want this book to be a New York Times bestseller. And it feels so ridiculous to admit that out loud, because that's such an arbitrary kind of goal to have. It's also really hard to get a book on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's like so much of it is dependent on factors outside of our own control. And normally I'm not a fan of setting goals for things that are outside of my control. So like with this YouTube channel, I've never really been a fan of setting a subscriber goal or a views goal or a revenue goal. Instead, my goal is just I want to produce 2 videos a week, because making 2 videos a week is something in my control. Whereas subscribers, views, revenues, all of that stuff is outside of my control. But for some reason, I kind of changed my usual mode of operation for this book. And I was like, you know what? I really want this to be a New York Times bestseller. And I think that fixation on the outcome was another thing that was causing me to lie in bed at night when I couldn't sleep. And I'll be thinking about, oh, you know, how do we market this book? And, you know, what's it going to be about? And how do we make sure it's good? And I was putting so much pressure on this idea of this book being a bestseller that I think I was losing sight of the fact that this whole thing is supposed to be fun.
Oh, this is some good stuff. This was 24th of February 2021. We were in the middle of lockdown. I had not had a haircut or a beard trim in like months because everything was closed. And I'd spent 6 months working my way up to all of this effort in the book proposal, only to get feedback from various people that it was a bit shit. And now the book is out, and it is a New York Times and Sunday Times bestseller. And the times where I made the most progress on the book was when I focused on enjoying the process. It always just comes back down to that, you guys. It just does. Like, even looking at all these lessons throughout the last 8 years of being on this platform and building this business, all of it basically converges on the idea that the journey is the destination. That focusing on enjoying the process leads to better results than focusing on trying to get better results. And in these last 6 months where I was, in 2021, 2020, when I was working on this book proposal, yeah, it felt very serious and very heavy. But then this was a lesson that I also forgot at various times in the journey. Initially working on the first draft, I focused on making it fun. And then it became heavy and became serious again, and I got into my own head. Then when doing the editing, initially it was fun, and then it became serious and heavy, and I just had such a weird relationship with this book where it was like, sometimes the process of it was enjoyable, and that was when I made progress. And sometimes the process was not enjoyable, and that was when I stalled out and I didn't make any progress. And I'm like, genuinely, like, as I think about writing future books, and as I think about working on this business and stuff, this is a lesson that I still, even though I've written a book about it, I still have not quite learned fully that feeling good does in fact make you more productive, but also makes your entire life better. And so it's kind of cool for me to reflect, looking back on these lessons over the last 8 years, and realize that I had to keep on reminding myself of that truth. It still hasn't quite sunk in, because I guess all of society tells us that you've got to work hard, you've got to do the thing, you've got to put in more effort, and it's like if you're finding something hard, just work harder, do more, try harder. But if we take a step back and genuinely ask, what would this look like if it were fun? I literally have this as a wallpaper on my phone. Where's my phone? I don't know where my phone is, but it's literally a wallpaper on my phone. I have it used to have it as a post-it note on my desktop. In fact, I have a screen now. Let me add it as a post-it note. I'll find a post-it note and stick it on my screen. What would this look like if it were fun? How do I make this thing 10% more enjoyable? That's the way. It just is. My goodness.
how many projects should you have going at a given moment? And I think this is going to vary for different people. I've been speaking to basically everyone I know about this over the last several months. I think the number is basically 5 plus or minus 2. So somewhere between 3 and 7 seems to be around about the number that seems to be reasonable for most people. Coincidentally, this is, if you look into the research behind working memory, this is how many chunks of information we can hold in our working memory, in the random access memory, the RAM of our brain. It's how many chunks of information we can hold at a given moment. So for example, when they do studies where they ask people to memorize bits of numbers, generally, people can memorize 5 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. And I think that seems to be roundabout accurate for this active investment stuff as well. Usually people I've spoken to, and if I think of myself, when I've got like more than 7 projects on the go, it feels like I'm completely scattered and I'm gonna kind of burn out doing those things. Whereas when I have less than that, it feels much more manageable. And basically the smaller this number is, like I only really need to put my kind of personal life effort into these 2 or 3 extra things each week. That then starts to feel really good.
Okay, this video was filmed on the 19th of August, 2022. I would have been 28 years old. 27, 28, something like that. Channel would have been on, I have no idea how many subscribers. But this was when we had a proper office and studio in London. That was a 1-year experiment to see what it would be like to actually have an office. I decided to go back to filming from my house because the office was just kind of expensive and it's nice to have. But at some point in my life in the future, one of my dreams is to have my own like co-working space with a team office, with like a podcast and YouTube production studio attached to it, and like a coffee shop and a library and a gym all rolled into one building. That would be sick. That's like a project for the next 5 to 10 years. But for now, for this current season of my life, I realized that actually I like the flexibility and the freedom of just shooting from my house, rather than the extra expenses of having a whole extra office, which is why now we use WeWork, all access passes, for whatever that's worth. Anyway, that aside, this was really the turning point for me where I realized that less is more and turned it into this video, this like energy investment portfolio. And I still use a variation of the system to this day where I have a long list of things that I would like to do and a very short list of things that I'm actively doing right now. My whole system for goal setting is not even like 3 to 7 goals. It's like 3 to 5 goals. I found that when I have somewhere between 3 and 5 goals, that is when I can make progress on, a reasonable number of them. But when I start having more than that, when I start thinking I want to juggle all of these different things, that's when nothing really gets done, and that's a total recipe for burnout. So yeah, keeping the numbers small. Completely coincidentally, yesterday I had a podcast conversation with Cal Newport, who has written a great book called Slow Productivity. And we were talking about this as well. He's done a load of research into kind of people like Jane Austen and John McPhee and sort of these Galileo and Marie Curie and these sorts of people from back in the day who were very productive, but in a different sort of way than what we mean by productivity now. And a lot of his shtick that I completely agree with is that you want to have a small number of projects active at any given time. And I was giving a class for my productivity lab yesterday, and a load of people were really struggling with this idea of trying to juggle too many things. And the unfortunate truth is that it is impossible to juggle too many things. Like this whole thing about being able to have it all, it is just a bit of a myth. And the more you can reduce the number of active things that you are working on at any given time, the more progress you make on them, and also the more chill your life is, and the more ability you actually have to enjoy the process, a la feel-good productivity. Whatever position you are in life, we are all basically faced with the choice of, do we do a thing that will make us more money, or do we do a thing that will help us enjoy life more? Now, it is very, very unusual to meet someone who is so perfectly aligned that like the things that they would genuinely do for fun are also the things that make them money in the most efficient way. It's just basically never going to be like that. Like for most people, there is a difference between what they're doing right now and what they would do if they didn't care about making money. And so we all have this trade-off in some ways. However much money you have, you could continue to do things to make more money, or you can be okay with making less money and you can do things that help you enjoy your life a bit more. All right, this is a video I filmed in November last year, maybe about 6 months ago. I was 29 at the time. And the big realization was that it is okay to leave money on the table. This whole arc of my YouTube career since 2017 up to 2024, a lot of it was, initially, it was this thing around, hey, I'm doing this thing. Yes, I'm enjoying the process, but really, the reason I'm doing it is because I like this idea of building this life that I love. I like this idea of not being shackled to a job that I don't necessarily enjoy, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And there came a point where I made the money and I had enough. And yet, the temptation was still there to continue chasing more and more money, to make the numbers go up, to feel like, well, I've only got a few single-digit millions in the bank, so like I'd feel more financially secure and safe if I had double-digit millions in the bank. It's like these stupid-ass things. And really, over the last 6 months, it's come as a big sort of turnaround to realize that actually, I'm okay with leaving money on the table. I've been doing a few talks recently, and I had a few people come up to me, and a surprisingly large number of people have said, people who've been following my channel for a very long time. In the early days of the channel, it felt really nice. It felt like I was sharing stuff from the heart, and then somewhere around the middle, it sort of flipped into this kind of clickbaity category where everything was a bit over-optimized, and it sort of lost a bit of the soul. Then these people said that the last few months of content on the channel, they've felt has been more like old Ollie used to be, which is always an interesting thing to say because or rather, it's always interesting feedback to give because I change over time and I don't want to confine myself to like an old version of myself and what people thought. If someone was like, hey, I preferred you when you were 23, it's like, okay, well, I'm 30 now, so whatevs. But I think there is something there around the middle, maybe like 2022, 2023 on the YouTube channel, when I had a bigger team and we had more expenses and we had lots of sponsored videos and we had lots of courses that we were plugging all the time and stuff. It did feel as if the reason I was making videos was not because I enjoyed it, but because it was the business, it was the job, it was the money. But since having this realization about 6 months ago and recognizing, you know what, I actually do have enough. I actually am going to focus on just enjoying the process, and I'm only going to make YouTube videos when I feel like it. This is a YouTube video that I'm making because I feel like it. It's probably not going to get that many views, being honest, because if the way you get lots of views on YouTube is by creating a viral clickbait title that appeals to people outside of your core audience, right? This video is not going to appeal to anyone outside of my core audience. Even within my core audience, it's a bit long, a bit rambly, maybe no one cares, whatever. But I want to make this video. I think it's a cool video to make, and I think for the handful of people who might watch it, there might be something interesting that can help someone genuinely remind themselves of what they already know, which is that actually enjoyment is efficiency, enjoy the process. Somewhat forget about the outcome because the outcome will take care of itself as you focus on enjoying the process. This is not a video that's going to go viral, probably. If it does, great. But that's not what I'm making the video because I genuinely feel like it. And over the last few months, since having this realization that it's okay to leave money on the table, it almost now feels like I'm playing with house money, to use a gambling analogy, where I can be more carefree and relaxed with the content. I feel less of that sense of like, oh shit, this is my living now. I need to make sure I make the videos and make sure I make them on time, make sure I appease the algorithm and the audience. It's like, no. I'll make the videos that I want to make if I think there's a valuable message or interesting message to share. I won't care too much about how they perform. My team cares about how they perform, and that's okay. But I don't need to care too much about how they perform. And all of this basically stemmed from this massive realization that I had a bit of a period of burnout, had a friend who had a health scare, realizing that I do have enough. And in many ways, I've always had enough. And at the times where I focused on enjoying the process, rather than focused on making more money, I have ironically made more money as well. So yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, the desire for more money, more status, more accolades, more whatever, more career progression often comes at the cost of enjoyment. But ironically, if you focus on the enjoyment, you'll probably get the other stuff anyway, and you'll be way happier along the way. Which now brings us to the end of this video. So firstly, thank you very much for watching. If you've gotten this far, I would love to hear a comment from you, because you're probably an OG fan of the channel or something like that, so super appreciate that. But I'd love to hear in the comment, what video would you like to see next? Part of my desire to make videos is because I feel like there's a message to share, but it's always really helpful for me to know what you guys want to hear me talk about, because if I know that there's appetite for something, if loads of people are asking, how do you deal with procrastination or motivation? I'm like, oh, okay, I can do a video about that. It kind of makes it feel more fun to make the video if I know that people actually want it, rather than because I get a thing from the algorithm or YouTube Studio Analytics saying that, oh, people want this video. So I'd much prefer to hear it from you guys. And if you did enjoy this video and you haven't yet seen my video from a few months ago, this is 7 life lessons I wish I knew sooner, which doesn't have much overlap with what I talked about here. So you can check that video out over there. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.